My name is Brett Robertson, and this is my Milestone 1 project for cybersecurity environment management. Um, as you can see here, I created an Ubuntu virtual machine, and I decided to go with Ubuntu because I actually had already set up a Kali Linux virtual machine for another class, and I just wanted to get more experience with a different distribution, so that's why I went with Ubuntu. Um, this is on UTM, which is a hypervisor that you can basically use on MacBook. I have an M2 chip, so that's why I had to go with UTM. But yeah, I went ahead, I installed it. The installation went pretty smooth. I documented it. So this actually brings me to one of my first security configurations that I made. So instead of just running the system as a root user, I made it so that there is a user account, which is obviously for me here. I went ahead and I created a password, and it's a difficult password. Like it's not related to the username or anything like that, but it's not easy to guess or anything like that. And then the other configuration that I did was I actually went into the settings and I just changed the so that there's a screen lock. So basically, like if I'm away for 5 minutes or so, there's no activity on here. You get locked out of the desktop. Yeah, I think that's a good starting point for this. You know, I'll maybe go ahead and add some more configurations in the second milestone, but that wraps it up. Thank you. Hi, this is Brett Robertson. What you just watched was the milestone 1 portion of the project. This is now milestone 2. And basically, what I had done in that first portion was I just set up my Ubuntu server and, just some basic like account configurations for extra security. What I went ahead and did for this second part was I went in and added some storage security configurations. And then I also went and added configurations related to automation. Basically, the point of having these on here is just to, limit people who don't need to, be accessing certain files or directories, uh, you know, from using those, right? This is just for better control on the system. All right, so I'm first going to start out by talking about my storage security configurations. Basically, I made two on the system for now, and the first one that I did was I changed the default UMask for my user account. Um, Basically, I think the default before was like 002, something like that. I went and changed it to 027. And basically what UMask does is it helps determine, who will have access to something new that I create. So just to verify that it's working, and again, I went and changed all this before recording this. If you run UMask, it returns this right here, which tells me that it's working. And basically with this setting on, the owner who creates files or directories will have the main access, and then that owner's group will have limited access. And users outside of that group will basically have no access. So that's just kind of how that works. All right, and now the next command that I'm going to run is basically just checking a test folder that I created after changing the setting. So it's ls ld security test. And as you can see right here, what this means in this right here is that the owner can read, write, and enter the folder. Um, the group can just read and enter it, but they can't make any kind of executable changes. and then any other users don't have access at all. And then this next command that I'll do is checking the file inside of that test folder. So as you can see, the output of this is this. And basically that just means that the owner can read and write the file, the group can only read it, and then other users have no access. But yeah, basically just changing the UMask setting on here just makes it so that any new files are, you know, more private by default. It prevents other users from accessing info that they don't need. But yeah, that concludes the first storage security configuration. Right, so my second storage configuration that I added was I created a secure folder that only the root user has access to. So I'm gonna go ahead and clear what I just did earlier. And I'm gonna go ahead and show you a command that verifies it. All right, so this shows that the folder is owned by root and that only the owner has access to this file. So if I were to run this command, as you can see, you don't have permission because, this is just a regular user that is running that command. Now if I go ahead and use the sudo command, as you can see, if you go and use the sudo command, you can access it because, you're an admin, you're not a regular user. So therefore you can access sensitive files. But yeah, this was just a good, quick, and easy configuration that I added. More sensitive files will be protected this way. And this is just always a good thing to implement in every system. All right, so the next two configurations that I made were related to automation. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this terminal. All right, so the first automation configuration that I made was restricting a user from using cron tab. So what cron tab is it allows users to basically like run tasks automatically. But of course you don't necessarily need all users on a system to be able to do this. There might be a case where you want to restrict some people from being able to do this and maybe messing something up. So what I went ahead and did was I actually created another user, which is called cron user, and I restricted that one. So I already did the commands for that, but to show that it is blocked from using it, as you can see, it's the only one on here. So cron user is restricted from using cron tab. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and switch to that user and see if I can access the cron tab tasks. So just do that. And I literally just made this password the other day and I almost forgot it. Okay, so as you can see, I have switched the user and now I'm gonna try to access it. And yeah, as you can see, there's a message saying that I'm not allowed to use this program. So that verifies that this user is restricted from it. But yeah, just like anything else, this is just like all the other configurations I've made so far, it's just limiting certain users from using things. But that's definitely another good one to have there. All right, so my final configuration is very similar to the last one. It is dealing with cron tab, but this is basically restricting access to the cron files and folders themselves. So I only wanted the root user to be able to have access to this because, again, I don't want regular users on my system doing anything to these files, and, editing an automation or a task that I don't want them to, or, something that could go wrong. But yeah, I already went and configured everything when I was making my document. But this is just to check and see who can read and write the cron file. So let's go ahead and enter this command. And as you can see, it's only the root user, which is the owner of this file, that can read and write what's in it. And this command right here basically just checks all the folders that have, schedule tasks like weekly, hourly, monthly. Um, and yeah, as you can see, it's just the root user that can, edit and modify these files. But yeah, once again, restricting access to unwanted users is just a really good, security principle. It makes it so that only an admin can manage important things like scheduled tasks. But yeah, it just makes it more secure. But yeah, that wraps everything up for Milestone 2. Those were all of my storage and automation security configurations that I added. Ultimately, what all these configurations do is they just restrict unauthorized users from, doing things that I don't want them to do on my system. Um, but yeah, overall, I learned a lot from this project. I learned a lot from the labs, but being able to put this on my own server was definitely a good learning experience, and I'm glad that I was able to do that. But yeah, that's it. That concludes this video. Thank you.